Thanks for waking up with us.
How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to Staying Focused for Jesus. Hope each and every one of you are having a blessed day in the Lord Jesus Christ as always. So came across this video and it had some pretty interesting information in the video. As you see, the video says new artifacts change our picture on ancient Israel. So we're going to listen to what they got to say, and then we're going to pause it, and it's going to show you that people that profess to believe the Bible, most people that profess to believe the Bible don't actually believe the Bible. Because this is stuff that we have been saying. People arguing about, oh, you shouldn't be saying his name here, and you shouldn't be saying his name there. You shouldn't be calling him Jesus because that's not his name, and all this other stuff. Why wouldn't you want to call him by his original name? All these other things. When the truth of the matter is, one, most of the people that are using Hebrew today, they are using the Yiddish version of Hebrew. Two, the Lord said that he was going to speak to us in another language, another tongue, because we were not listening to him with the quote-unquote native tongue. So, also three, God is the one that confounded the languages. Four, when Christ was crucified, King of the Jews was written in 3 different languages. 5, in the book of Revelation, it mentions who we know as the devil. It mentions his name in the Hebrew tongue and in the Greek tongue. But yet we know it's still talking about the same being.
Meanwhile, Israeli archaeologists have unearthed 24 Dead Sea Scroll fragments in the Judean desert, the first discovery of the ancient Jewish texts in more than half a century. RT correspondent John Huddy has more.
So these are some new Dead Sea Scrolls that they found in a completely different location. Not your ancient Dead Sea Scrolls that we know about. This is a completely new discovery.
Another amazing discovery in the Holy Land. This time, dozens of Dead Sea Scroll fragments with ancient biblical texts believed to be hidden during a Jewish revolt against the Romans nearly 1900 years ago. Archaeologists.
So, backstory to it is that there was a revolt. They hid into these caves or whatnot, and they had religious texts in regards to what we know as the Bible.
The Israel Antiquities Authority found the ancient pieces of parchment buried deep inside a cave called the Cave of Horrors in the Judean desert. It's where Jewish rebels are believed to have hid during an uprising against the Roman Emperor Hadrian between AD 132 and AD 136. The skeletons of 40 men, women, and children were found in the same cave many years ago. Bedouin shepherds discovered the original Dead Sea Scrolls in the 1940s, and archaeologists later in the 1950s near the northern shore of the Dead Sea. The latest fragments include the ancient Hebrew text for God and Greek translations of the book of Zechariah, including one fragment reading, "These are the things you are to do. Speak the truth to one another, render true and perfect justice in your gates." Or an
Did you hear that? These are Jews, Hebrews, who ran to this cave, and if I recall correctly, a lot of Hebrews, this revolt they're talking about, I can't remember the name of it, but if my memory calls me correctly, this revolt they're talking about is something that a lot of Hebrews speak about. They even go to the Apocrypha to speak about this revolt. And it is historical. You can find it, outside the Apocrypha and many other sources. If this is the revolt that I think that they're talking about that happened around 70 AD. But they had it in the language that they were speaking in during that time period, and they also had it in what? They had it in Greek. They had it in Greek. So Hebrews back then were speaking Greek, and they obviously had no problem with it because they had scriptures in the Greek language.
A Dead Sea Scroll researcher with the Israel Antiquities Authority said the fragments give researchers another view into the cultural world of the Jewish rebels during this time in history.
Many times these rebels are thought to be specifically very nationalistic Hebrew-speaking Jews, but what we see here is that they also spoke Greek, that they read in Greek, and that they had their scriptures in Greek sometimes.
They spoke in Greek, they read in Greek, and they had scriptures that were in Greek. They knew their native tongue, they spoke their native tongue, but they also spoke in Greek, they read in Greek, and they had scriptures in the Greek tongue. As he's going to say, why? Because at that time period, Greek was more so the main language. The main language. So to communicate and do business, you speak the main language, as he's going to say, just like you have the English language. You can't walk around, speaking ancient Hebrew or Swahili or whatever, talking about you want to do business, because most people aren't going to understand you. I don't care how good you are at business. They're not going to want to fool with you. They're like, man, just learn English or get an interpreter. That's just the way how things are.
Greek was kind of the common language of the time, kind of a bit like English is an international language today.
Archaeologists also discovered a collection of ancient coins, arrowheads, and a 6,000-year-old partially mummified child skeleton wrapped in cloth, and what the Antiquities Authority says may be the oldest completely intact basket ever discovered. All in all, a, quote, magnificent and rare collection of treasures unearthed before grave robbers could plunder them, adding yet more important pieces to the mysterious Dead Sea Scroll puzzle and helping to paint a clearer picture of what life and faith was like long ago. For the news with Rick Sanchez, John Huddy.
So I don't know if that skeleton is actually 6,000 years old. That would be I didn't say pretty cool, but that would be pretty amazing that that skeleton is in there if it is 6,000 years old, because we know what that means, how far that goes back. But just to show you. So that's why it's so important to stick to the scriptures. The scriptures, KJV, must be your final authority. And this is stuff that I've been preaching. Many of us have been preaching for years. And y'all sit here and you talk about you can't call him Jesus and all this other stuff because we wouldn't do that. And we have actual historical evidence to back up what the scriptures already said. God is the one that confounded the languages. He said that he was going to speak to us in another tongue. He said it in the book of Deuteronomy. He said it in so many places. We see the different languages all throughout the scriptures where they give a name in one language and they give a name in another language, but it's the same name. It means the same thing relating to that person. Peter, y'all say, oh, Peter's a Greek name. Cephas, stone. Guess what Peter means? Stone. Same meaning, same person. We're not talking about Peter or Cephas in another part of the country. We're talking about Peter, Cephas, and there's also another name that he was called. I think it was Simon Peter. Simon Peter, because it's a surname and whatnot. Yeah, we're talking about that Peter specifically that was with Christ, not some other Peter that was in the same region. Just like you have many Johns that stay in one city. What John are you talking about? Oh, John Smith. Oh, there are 30 John Smith that stay in this city. Which one are you talking about? The one that stays on 1530 Buckingham Road or whatever. Well, there's another John Smith that stays on 1533 Buckingham Road. So which one? You know, then you narrow it down. Oh, we're talking about this one right here. We're not talking about the John Smith that stayed on the street. We're talking about this John Smith. So, just a little short video exposing the lies of people. They're deceiving you. They're lying to you. And you have to start questioning stuff. You got to really start questioning stuff. Where if they're claiming to be led by the Spirit, then how come everything they're saying is coming out to be a lie? Why is the stuff that they're saying coming out to be a lie? Many are called, but few are chosen. So it says a new set of Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient fragments of biblical texts dating back almost 2,000 years and thought to have been hidden during a Jewish revolt against Rome, have been found in the West Bank. The Israeli Antiquities Authority announced Tuesday that a 4-year archaeological project uncovered portions of the Book of the 12 Minor Prophets, including the books of Zechariah and Nahum. It was the first such discovery in 60 years. Also uncovered was so we already know about that. Let's go down some more. And this is what's interesting, one of the texts they brought up, which is prophetic in itself. Among the recovered texts, which are all in Greek, is Nahum chapter 1, verses 5 and 6, which says, "The mountains quake because of him, and the hills melt. The earth heaves before him, the world and all that dwell therein. Who can stand before his wrath? Who can resist his fury? His anger pours out like fire, and rocks are shattered because of him." Obviously, that's the modern day understanding translation, but you get the point of what it's saying. That is prophetic in itself because of what's going on. Do we think that this is just a coincidence? You think it's just a coincidence? And also, it's been 60 years since the last Dead Sea Scrolls were found. So what we're going to do after we read the article is we're going to look up the number 60 in relation to the Bible. We're going to look up the number 60 in relation to the Bible, right? Because we need to understand what's really going on. I mean, if that scripture right there don't tell you something, then I don't know what to tell you. The authority said these words differ slightly from other Bible versions, shedding a rare light on how biblical text changed over time from its earliest form. But it's pretty much saying that. Matter of fact, we'll also look at it from the King James, so we can get it from that perspective. We always like to go back there. We always want to go back there. The first set of Dead Sea Scrolls to be discovered were found by a Bedouin shepherd, and some of you know about the Bedouins, in the same area in 1947, and are considered among the most important archaeological finds of the 20th century, although biblical scholars disagree on their authorship. Most of those scrolls are in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, but both Jordan and the Palestinian Authority have disputed their ownership. Qumran in the West Bank, the site where they were found, is part of land seized by Israel in the 1967 war, and would have been part of a future Palestinian state. So we know how the modern day Israelis, they get down. It is very exciting to see these finds and expose them to the public. Finds which shed great light on our history, not their history, it's our history. Avi Cohen, CEO of the Ministry of Jerusalem and Heritage, said, "These finds are not just important to our own cultural heritage, but to that of the entire world." Other items include a cache of coins bearing Jewish symbols, including a harp and a date palm, all things that relate to the scriptures. We know about that. Arrowheads and spearheads, woven fabric, sandals, and lice combs, because we know how the laws about being clean and everything. And thought to date from the end of the Bar Kokhba revolt, and that's what I was talking about right there. Many Hebrew Israelites, they bring that up about this revolt, and it's mentioned in the Apocrypha. So yeah, I was right on that. In which Jews fought against Roman rule in Judea. Now remember, Christ told them to get out of there when, well, you know, he warned them before this went down, before 70 AD. He warned them, but they didn't listen. They did not listen, so they had these things happen to them. And then obviously some of them fled out of there, and they hid in these caves. The cave was called the Cave of Horror, the Cave of Terror, or something like that. And they had scriptures in the Greek. They had Old Testament minor prophet scriptures in the Greek language. Wow. So let's jump over here, and we're going to look at the number 60 in relation to the Bible. And we're also going to look at Nahum chapter 1 verses 5 and 6, and then we'll get ready to close it out. So it tells us, part of the meaning of the number 60 is derived from the fact that it is considered the threshold of when a person enters the last major phase of their life. Wow. So when we look at that in light of the scriptures, in light of what Nahum chapter 1 verses 5 and 6 said, we see what God is saying. That people are entering into the last major phase of their life, because he's about to drop the judgment on this world. He's about to bring hellfire and brimstone and his fierce anger and wrath. So their time period for salvation is coming to a close. Again, it is considered the threshold of when a person enters the last major phase of their life. For many people, they are about to enter the last major phase of their life, going into the time of Jacob's trouble. Most people, when the time of Jacob's trouble starts, between what happens between the catching away and when the time of Jacob's trouble actually starts, some people make the argument, say the time of Jacob's trouble starts when the catching away happens or whatnot. And you know, I won't argue against that. But the point is, when it happens, when all hell breaks loose, because it's order out of chaos, there's no reason for the Antichrist to step on the scene if it's not, you know what I'm saying, chaos, you know, and him bringing in worldwide peace. So something major is going to transpire. Most people aren't going to even make it into the time of Jacob's trouble. Most people are not even going to make it into the time of Jacob's trouble. Now, I did a sermon a while back where I showed you in the scriptures that most likely when the catching away happens, there's going to be some crazy weather going on. Some crazy weather. And we're going to perceive certain things one way, and they're going to be perceiving certain things another way. And that's the same thing pretty much with anything. We perceive the Bible one way, and the wicked, they perceive the Bible completely different to how we perceive the Bible. We perceive and receive Christ one way, and they perceive and receive Christ completely different. Some of you may remember that sermon. It's in my playlist on the catching away. I can't remember the name of the video, but if you go back and you find my playlist on the catching away, then you can find that video. You'll see it in the title or whatnot. So again, many people are about to enter the last major phase of their life, their physical life, and then they're going to die and then lift up their eyes in hell, and then after that, the great white throne judgment. The Apostle Paul warned Timothy that the church should not financially support widows less than 60 years old. This was because those who were younger were considered able to remarry or strong enough to support themselves. Under the Old Covenant, a 60-year-old male could redeem himself from a vow of serving the Lord by paying 15 shekels to the temple. This is the time you need to redeem yourself. That's why he said, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. You have to give a account for yourself. A 60-year-old woman could redeem herself from such a vow for only 10 shekels. This compared to younger adult males who had to pay 50 shekels, while younger women paid 30. Isaac, after his wife is healed of being barren, has his first two sons, Esau and Jacob, when he is 60 years old. So what it tells us, when he had his two sons, he was 60 years old, and he was entering into the last major phase of his life, having those two children, right? Because we know from Jacob comes Israel, right? Jacob is Israel. Part of the inheritance of the Israelite tribe of Manasseh were the towns of Jair, which number 60 cities, which is an inheritance, the last part of your life, because you know when you come into the last part, you're getting older, you're looking forward to retirement. So he's also telling us that our retirement is coming. Our retirement is on the horizon. We are closer. Our redemption draws nigh. Our redemption is closer than we think it is. King Solomon was so wealthy that his household required daily, among many other provisions, 60 measures of fine flour. Rehoboam, the first king over Judah after a united Israel split in two, ultimately had 18 wives and 60 concubines. Concubines were women whose kids, through the king, could not inherit the throne. These 78 females produced a total number of 28 sons and 60 daughters. That's the reason they had so many wives and concubines, to have a whole bunch of children, so the lineage could grow. The seed could grow, which was a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. King Nebuchadnezzar made an idol of gold that stood 60 cubits. He then required, on pain of death, all those whom Babylon ruled to worship it. All those who Babylon ruled to worship it. It was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's refusal to indulge in idol worship that got them thrown into a fiery furnace. So some of us are about to be really, really tried. Many people are about to be tried because you've been failing your test that you have already been given. And God is about to pull your card. It could very well be me. I could be about to go through some things that are going to be greater trials and tribulations that I have been currently going through. But what about you? Are you ready? Are you ready to be put in the fiery furnace? This is what I've been preparing y'all for the whole time that I've been preaching. That you don't know what you're gonna have to go through. You don't know, so you must prepare yourself for the worst. The worst for me would be them taking my kids and my wife and doing stuff in front of them. You know, that would be the worst for me. But guess what? I'm already prepared for that. I'm already prepared for that. The Apostle Paul is arrested in early 58 AD for inciting a riot at Jerusalem Temple. He is eventually transported under armed guard to Caesarea so that the Romans can protect him before his case is tried. Governor Felix, however, keeps Paul in prison for 2 years, hoping to solicit a bribe for his freedom. Luke, who frequently visits the apostle during his imprisonment, writes his gospel during this period. He also pens, with Paul's oversight, the first 13 chapters of Acts. Which is why the Bible, talks about, visiting, the believers in prisons and stuff like that. Paul appears to Caesar in 60 AD, leads to him traveling the treacherous Mediterranean waters to Rome. And you remember what happened when he was in Rome? He rented a house pretty much, and then he was preaching the gospel out of his house. And then he pretty much, as we say, rode off into the sunset because it was coming toward the end of his ministry. Luke the evangelist accompanies him on the ship. The number 60 in worshiping God. Many offerings were made by the Israelites after Moses set up, anointed, and sanctified God's wilderness tabernacle. 60 rams, along with the same number of male goats and lambs that were a year old, were given as an offering when the altar was dedicated. So that's pretty interesting. Jerusalem's first temple, built by King Solomon, was 60 cubits long, by 20 cubits wide, by 30 cubits high. There were at least two sizes of cubits used in the Old Testament. The first, or ordinary cubit, was about 17.5 inches long. The second was the long, or royal cubit, was about 20.4 inches long. The royal cubit was likely used by Solomon to build Jerusalem's temple, where a cubit after the first measure is used, and possibly used in the construction of Noah's Ark. So it says, assuming an ordinary cubit was used, the temple's 60 cubit length is equivalent to 87.5 feet. If we assume a royal cubit was used, the length would be 102 feet. Additional info on the biblical meaning of 60. The true meaning of Jesus' parable of the sower reveals some of the major responses people produce who hear God's truth. Many who hear the gospel simply reject it. Others, because of the shallowness of their faith, abandon their convictions when trials come, or when they place a higher priority on worldly cares. Those, however, who are able to allow the truth to grow inside them can produce fruit, good works. That is 30, as Jesus said, some 30, some 60, or 100 times more than what they receive. So, what fruit are you producing? Are you bringing a return on investment? What type of return are you bringing? Because it's almost retirement time. It's almost retirement time. Rather that retirement is good, or rather that retirement is bad. It's almost retirement time. It's almost time for us to be judged. Rather, it is at the judgment seat of Christ, which is where you want to be. Or for many people, the great white throne judgment, which is where you don't want to be. You tell me, you tell yourself. The time for games is over, y'all. The time for games is over. So we jump over here to Nahum chapter 1, and we're going to read the whole thing because it's not too long. But also, I forgot to mention this. 60 is also a measurement of time. 60 seconds, 60 minutes. So what is God saying? He's saying the same thing because God works in patterns. Your time is almost up. Rather for better or for worse. Our time is almost up. Rather for the better or for the worse. Think about that. Like I said, do you think it's a coincidence that this was found 60 years later? And I wonder, is it exactly 60 years, or is it like 59 years and 11 months? I wonder. Or is it even over 60 years? Is it like 60 years and a few months? I wonder. That's something I have to look into, on my own. So let's see what Nahum tells us. The burden of Nineveh, We know what Nineveh was doing. Nineveh repented, but God said that if the works that he did and during his lifetime, if he did those same works in Nineveh, Nineveh would have repented a long time ago. So look at the work that God has done in America. No doubt God has blessed America over the years, over the centuries, and America has continued to spit in the face of God. Even when America was founded on blood, God still had grace and mercy upon America. So if Nineveh repented, then what is he going to do to the nations that continue to reject him, continue to reject his gospel, continue to reject his son, the Lord Jesus Christ? Well, he's going to tell us. God is jealous and the Lord revengeth. The Lord revengeth and is furious. The Lord will take vengeance on his adversaries, and he reserveth wrath for his enemies. So I ask you again, do you think it's a coincidence that this was found 60 years later? And also thinking about what we just read and what we just saw in regards to the number 60. Here he is speaking about judgment. And we see everything that's going on in the world. But people think this is a game. People think this is a joke. But they're going to find out very, very, very soon. They're going to find out very, very, very soon that it's not a game. It was never a game. It was never a joke. And if it was a joke, God is going to have the last laugh. The Lord is slow to anger. God was slow to anger with America and the other nations, because if he wasn't, then America would have been destroyed. And great in power, and will not at all acquit the wicked. The Lord hath his way in the whirlwind and in the storm. Interesting, because Christ was taken up in the cloud in the whirlwind. And every time you see something dealing with Christ or something dealing with the Father and everything, you see something dealing with a whirlwind. Enoch, and we can go down the list. And the clouds are the dust of his feet. He rebuketh the sea and maketh it dry, and drieth up all the rivers. Bashan languisheth, and Carmel and the flower of Lebanon languisheth. The mountains quake at him, and the hills melt, and the earth is burned at his presence, yea, the world and all that dwell therein. Who can stand before his indignation? And who can abide in the fierceness of his anger? His fury is poured out like fire, and the rocks are thrown down by him. That reminds me of Revelation chapter 6, when the sixth seal is broken. The wrath of the Lamb, who's able to stand, who's able to abide it. They go into the rocks and they hide themselves. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knoweth them that trust in him. He knows who was legit. Y'all can fake all you want to on Facebook, YouTube, or whatever, but God is going to show who is legit and who is fake. If I'm legit, he's going to show me as legit. If I'm fake, he's going to show me as fake. Then you be like, man, that dude, I thought he was legit. That brother fake. You know what I'm saying? So you ain't got to worry about me. I'm still speaking the truth. I'm still speaking the scriptures. But what about you? What about you, though? The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knoweth them that trust in him. But with an overrunning flood, he will make an utter end of the place thereof, and darkness shall pursue his enemies. See, the darkness is not for us. The darkness that's coming upon this world, that's already here, and it's going to be even a greater darkness that people ain't ready for. That's not for us. As he says, he is our stronghold in the day of trouble. So because we trust in him, He's not going to give that to us. But with an overrunning flood, he will make an utter end of the place thereof, and darkness shall pursue his enemies. What do ye imagine against the Lord? So you think you're going to fight against him and all these different things? You think you're going to defeat him? You think you're going to overthrow his throne? He will make an utter end. Affliction shall not rise up the second time. For while they be folded together as thorns, and while they are drunken as drunkards, they shall be devoured as stubble fully dry. And you ever shaved? Men, have you ever shaved? You ever shaved dry and your face was on fire? Women, have you ever shaved and it was dry and it burned? You ever had something, you know how fires start because they catch something dry? They shall be devoured as stubble fully dry. They're dry. They have no spirit, nothing. They have nothing. They're just like the serpent. And also, if we go back, he says, and while they are drunken as drunkards, he's going to, destroy them. He said, as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man. They were eating and drinking, giving in marriage, pretty much is saying not having a care in the world, not that we can't get married, not that we can't eat, and not that we can't drink. That ain't, obviously, that's not what he's saying. But they were living life. They're living their best life. Living their best life. I ain't going back and forth with you Negroes, as the song goes. YOLO. They partying, turning up, ready to get back to life. You know what I'm saying? Coronavirus, yeah, whoop the woo. We ready to get back. We're going to take our vaccine so we can get the hell on. Even though God brought the virus upon the people as judgment, and they don't care. So he's going to bring something greater. There's one come out of that imaginative evil against the Lord, a wicked counselor. Thus saith the Lord, though they be quiet and likewise many, yet thus shall they be cut down when he shall pass through. Though I have afflicted thee, I will afflict thee no more. For now will I break his yoke from off thee, and will burst thy bonds in sunder. And the Lord hath given a commandment concerning thee, that no more of thy name be sown. Out of the house of thy gods will I cut off the graven image, and the molten image I will make thy grave, for thou art vile. Behold, upon the mountains the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace. O Judah, keep thy solemn feasts, perform thy vows. Interesting. And then it's verse 15, 1 plus 5 equals 6. Perform thy vows. We just read something about that. For the wicked shall no more pass through thee. He is utterly cut off. So he's saying that, hey, change is coming. Change is coming. So yeah, hopefully you get the point. If not, you will find out very, very soon. Let us examine ourselves whether we be in the faith. With that being said, God bless each and every one of you. In Jesus Christ's name, as always, stay focused for Jesus, and that you know the truth is not debated. It is declared.
Thanks for waking up with us.